8:36 in the evening, April 25th. The security perimeter outside the Washington Hilton exploded into absolute chaos. One 12-gauge pump-action shotgun roared through the humid night air. One Secret Service officer took one direct blast to the chest. He survived only because of his heavy ballistic vest. Inside the grand ballroom, the annual White House Correspondents' Dinner stopped dead. The clinking of glasses and the low hum of political chatter vanished. They were replaced by the frantic shouts of federal agents. Secret Service tactical teams swarmed the main stage. They grabbed the president immediately, quickly. They grabbed the First Lady. They grabbed the Vice President. Within seconds, the highest-ranking officials in the United States government were rushed through secured service corridors. They were shoved into heavily armored vehicles. They vanished into the dark streets of the Capitol. Outside on the concrete, the shooter was bleeding from one shattered knee. 31-year-old Cole Thomas Allen was pinned to the ground by heavily armed police. He carried the 12-gauge shotgun. He carried one .38 caliber semi-automatic pistol. He carried multiple serrated combat knives. This was not some random violent act. Never. This was one highly calculated assassination attempt. It was aimed at the very heart of the American executive branch. But here is what nobody tells you about that night. The local authorities immediately tried to bury the real story. They wanted to contain the panic. They wanted you to believe this was just another isolated incident. But look closer at the timeline. Look at the weapons. Look at the unprecedented military movements happening right now in the Middle East. This was not some isolated event. This was one warning shot. And that was the moment everything changed for us. Completely. The Pentagon realized the homeland was no longer safe. Run the numbers with me. 5,000 miles away, the United States military is bleeding. They are locked in one brutal conflict. And the enemy just proved they can reach across the ocean. What they did not know was that the real nightmare was already inside the gates. The Department of Justice moved with terrifying speed. By April 27th, federal prosecutors charged Cole Thomas Allen with 3 federal counts. The primary charge was the attempted assassination of the president. They locked him in one federal prison. He sits there today. They sealed his communications. They seized his electronics. And then, the official narrative machine went into overdrive. District of Columbia Interim Police Chief Jeffrey Carroll stood before one forest of microphones. He looked directly into the cameras. He assured the American public that Allen was one lone actor. He promised there was no broader conspiracy at play. He insisted the threat had been completely neutralized. They pointed to one bizarre manifesto recovered from the suspect. In those rambling pages, Allen referred to himself as one friendly federal assassin. He targeted current administration officials. The media lied. They bought it all. They ran with the official story. They painted him as one disturbed individual from Torrance, California. One man who simply snapped. One man who acted entirely on his own. But military intelligence officers do not believe in coincidences. They believe in threat matrices. They believe in operational patterns. And the pattern emerging from Washington is deeply disturbing. If you look at the tactical execution of the assault, the lone wolf theory starts to fall apart. Allen managed to bypass multiple outer security rings. He arrived heavily armed at one highly secure event. He breached the outer perimeter without any issue. He chose the exact moment when the maximum number of high-value targets were concentrated in one single room. That requires intelligence. That requires surveillance. That requires one level of operational security rarely seen in amateur attackers. But the government refused to connect the dots. They desperately needed the public to remain calm. They needed to keep the focus on domestic politics. Why? Because acknowledging the alternative would trigger one national panic. It would force the administration to admit one catastrophic failure in border security and counterintelligence. But the Pentagon rejected the official public story. They knew the terrifying truth. They had seen this exact scenario play out before in foreign war zones, and that is when the classified intelligence briefings started leaking out. Go back exactly 1 month before the Washington Hilton attack. March 2026. Deep inside the signals intelligence vaults of the National Security Agency, one massive red flag was raised. American listening posts intercepted something terrifying. It was one encrypted Iranian shortwave transmission. It was bouncing across global relay stations. It was not standard military chatter. It was not diplomatic communication. It was one highly sophisticated broadcast. Intelligence analysts worked incredibly fast. They moved quickly. They worked around the clock to decipher the signal. When they finally broke the encryption, the blood drained from their faces. The transmission was flagged as one operational trigger. It was one coded green light designed to awaken dormant assets. It was one signal to sleeper cells embedded deep inside the United States and allied nations. Think about the sheer scale of that threat for 1 second. For years, hostile foreign intelligence services have exploited porous borders. They have funneled highly trained operatives into the country. They have mapped critical infrastructure. They have studied the security protocols completely. Without fail, they studied major political events. They have waited patiently in the shadows. They lived ordinary lives. They blended into the background. And they waited for the signal. The March transmission was that signal. And exactly 1 month later, one heavily armed man assaults the White House correspondents' dinner. The Washington establishment wants you to believe these two events are completely unrelated. They want you to believe the timing is just one tragic coincidence. But look closer at the geopolitical reality. Iran does not rely on conventional warfare to strike the American homeland. They use proxies. They use deniable assets. Always. They use radicalized individuals who can be manipulated into executing complex attacks. It is the ultimate asymmetric warfare strategy. It costs them almost nothing, but it forces the United States to spend billions locking down its own cities. This is not one theory. This is exactly how the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps operates. And what they did not know was that Central Command was already preparing one devastating response. The conflict in the Middle East is no longer one localized skirmish. It has evolved into one massive war of attrition, and the cost is absolutely staggering. Truly staggering beyond belief. On April 29th and 30th, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth faced one brutal interrogation. He sat before the Senate Armed Services Committee. The room was tense. The questions were hostile. Lawmakers demanded absolute transparency. And Hegseth delivered one crushing reality check. Over the past 2 months, the undeclared war with Iran has cost the American taxpayer $25 billion. $25 billion incinerated in just 60 days. That is more than $400 million spent every single day. It is the equivalent of buying almost 2 brand-new Ford-class aircraft carriers. But look closer right now. The financial cost is nothing compared to the human toll. Hegseth confirmed that 13 American service members have been killed in action. 13 flag-draped transfer cases returning to Dover Air Force Base. 13 families destroyed by one war that Congress never officially declared. The math of danger is heavily skewed against the United States. For every dollar the enemy spends on cheap suicide drones and archaic rockets, American forces spend millions on high-tech interceptors. One standard SM-6 missile costs $4.3 million. We are firing them at cheap targets. It is one bankrupt strategy, completely. No nation on Earth can afford to win one war that way. But Hegseth dropped an even bigger bombshell during his testimony. He revealed one highly controversial legal maneuver. The United States and Iran are currently observing one fragile, temporary ceasefire. Hegseth explicitly testified that this pause in combat operations legally pauses the war powers' resolution clock. Under federal law, the president has exactly 60 days to conduct military operations before requiring explicit congressional approval. By claiming the clock is paused, the administration found one massive loophole. They are bypassing the Senate. They are maintaining full executive control. Total control. They are buying time. Why? Because the Pentagon is secretly preparing for one massive escalation. And that was the moment the tactical reality on the ground completely shifted. The Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps realized they were bleeding. They knew American airstrikes were decimating their forward operating bases. So they did exactly what one smart, adaptive enemy does. They changed the rules of the game. For weeks, United States forces relied heavily on the Army Precision Strike Missile. The system is one phenomenal piece of engineering. It is fast. It is accurate. It has one maximum range of 300 miles. It was supposed to create one impenetrable bubble of protection around Allied forces. It was supposed to keep the fleet safe from shore-based attacks. But the Iranians are not stupid. They possess highly advanced satellite tracking capabilities. They mapped the exact maximum range of the American missile batteries. And then they executed one massive tactical retreat. Under the cover of darkness, Tehran relocated its heaviest, most destructive ballistic missile launchers. They dragged them deep into the rugged, mountainous interior of Iran. They moved them exactly beyond that 300-mile kill box. They placed them in fortified bunkers. Secretly, they placed them in underground bunkers. They are now completely untouchable by standard American artillery. The enemy outmaneuvered the Pentagon. They created one sanctuary zone where they can launch devastating strikes without fear of immediate counter-battery fire. This was one masterstroke of asymmetric warfare. It rendered billions of dollars of American defensive technology temporarily useless. The commanders at Central Command stared at their radar screens in absolute horror. They realized their primary strike weapons could not reach the new targets. The Iranian launchers were safe, and they were actively fueling their missiles for one massive barrage. But wait here. The United States military does not just accept defeat. They do not pack up and go home. They escalate. And the Pentagon made one desperate phone call to Washington. They requested one weapon so classified, so expensive, and so destructive, it has never been fired in actual combat. They demanded the ultimate trump card. On April 30th, Central Command sent one urgent, highly classified request to the Pentagon. They demanded the immediate deployment of the Dark Eagle, the long-range hypersonic weapon. This is not your standard cruise missile. This is one weapon of absolute apocalyptic destruction. Pay attention now. It represents the absolute bleeding edge of American military technology. The Dark Eagle travels at speeds exceeding Mach 5. That is over 3,800 miles per hour. It is so fast that it burns the oxygen around it. It creates one plasma sheath that makes it virtually invisible to standard radar systems. But speed is only half the equation. The Dark Eagle has one confirmed operational range of over 1,700 miles. It can launch from one completely different time zone and strike one target with pinpoint accuracy. It is the only weapon available today. Anywhere. It is the only weapon in the American arsenal capable of reaching those hidden Iranian launchers deep inside the mountains. Before the enemy radar operator even registers one blip on his screen, his entire underground complex is vaporized by kinetic energy. It is the ultimate bunker buster. But there is one massive, terrifying catch. And here is what nobody tells you about hypersonic warfare. Each Dark Eagle missile costs approximately $15 million. 15 million American taxpayer dollars for one single unrecoverable shot. And the United States currently possesses only about 8 of these missiles in the entire arsenal. Worldwide, 8 missiles. That is the entire operational stockpile. 8 missiles standing between the fleet and total disaster. If Central Command fires them and they miss, or if there are more targets than missiles, the United States has no backup plan. The margin for error is exactly 0. The deployment of the Dark Eagle is one massive gamble. It is one signal to the world that the United States is willing to use its most advanced strategic weapons to prevent one regional collapse. But look closer at what is happening inside the White House. The military is ready to strike. Now. But the political leadership has to pull the trigger. On May 1, 2026, the tension inside the Oval Office was suffocating. President Donald Trump sat behind the resolute desk. Across from him was Admiral Brad Cooper, the highly decorated commander of United States Central Command. Cooper did not come to Washington to discuss diplomacy. He came to deliver one chilling, highly classified briefing. He presented the president with multiple kinetic options for new military strikes. The strategy was clear: short and powerful strikes against critical Iranian infrastructure. The goal is to cripple their command and control networks permanently. The goal is to destroy their ballistic missile production facilities, to blind their sleeper cell handlers before they can activate more operatives on American soil. Cooper laid out the target packages. He showed high-resolution satellite imagery of the hidden launchers. He explained exactly how the Dark Eagle would penetrate Iranian airspace. He detailed the electronic warfare support required from the EA-18 Growlers. The plan was aggressive. It was designed to restore deterrence through overwhelming, disproportionate violence. The president reviewed the casualty projections. He reviewed the economic fallout models. He understood that authorizing this massive strike changes things completely. He understood that authorizing this strike would push the region past the point of no return. But doing nothing would project weakness. And weakness invites further aggression on American soil. The Washington Hilton incident proved that containment was failing. But the Iranians were listening. They have their own intelligence networks. They knew the American strike packages were being finalized. And on that exact same day, they delivered one terrifying response. The commander of Iran Aerospace Force stepped up to the podium in Tehran. Majid Mousavi is one man who controls one of the largest ballistic missile arsenals on Earth. Period. He did not mince words. He did not use diplomatic language. He issued one direct, apocalyptic threat to the United States Navy. Mousavi warned of long and painful strikes against American warships if Washington resumes its attacks. He specifically targeted the ongoing American naval blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. Look at the map. The Strait of Hormuz is the most critical geopolitical choke point on Earth. It is one narrow strip of water, just 21 miles wide at its narrowest point. Through that tiny channel, 1/5 of the entire world oil supply passes every single day. Without fail, it is the jugular vein of the global economy. The United States Navy currently has one massive carrier strike group operating in those confined waters. 5,000 American sailors aboard one single nuclear-powered aircraft carrier. They are sitting ducks in one narrow bathtub. If Iran unleashes one saturated swarm attack of hundreds of ballistic missiles and thousands of suicide drones, the American defense systems will be overwhelmed. The SM-6 interceptors will run dry. The phalanx close-in weapon systems will melt their barrels, and American steel will burn. Mousavi promised to turn the strait into one graveyard. Absolutely. He promised to turn it into one graveyard if the blockade continues. This is not one empty threat. They have the weapons. They have the coordinates. They are simply waiting for the United States to make the first move. The Washington Hilton attack was just the opening gambit. The real war is about to ignite in the waters of the Persian Gulf. We are standing on the absolute edge of the abyss. The lone wolf narrative in Washington is crumbling. The sleeper cells are active. The hypersonic missiles are locked and loaded. The fleet is trapped in the strait. Now, the fleet is trapped in the most dangerous waters on Earth. The countdown has already started. Will the Dark Eagle strike first? Or will the Iranian missiles rain down on the carrier strike group? The next 72 hours will determine the fate of the global economy and thousands of American lives. But there is one critical detail about the Iranian missile arsenal that the Pentagon is desperately trying to keep classified. One capability that changes everything we know about modern naval warfare. What exactly are they hiding in those mountain bunkers? And who is really pulling the strings? Today, the answers to those questions will redefine the global balance of power for the next century. The United States has never faced one adversary capable of striking the homeland while simultaneously holding one entire carrier strike group hostage. The rules of engagement are being rewritten in real time. Every single hour that passes brings the two nations closer to one irreversible collision. The diplomatic channels are completely silent. The missile silos are open. And the sleeper cells are waiting for their next encrypted broadcast. When that second transmission finally hits the airwaves, the shadow war will step into the light. And the American public will realize that the battlefield is no longer confined to the Middle East. It is outside their front door.